Captain Eamon Drake was a man who had seen it all. As the commanding officer of the Starhawk, a powerful warship that roamed the galaxy under the United Galactic Fleet, he was respected, feared, and admired. His reputation had reached the farthest corners of space, known not just for his tactical brilliance, but for his ability to stay calm under pressure. Few things caught his attention, but when something did, it was always worth investigating. The Starhawk had just docked at Xandar 5, a bustling trade station at the edge of the galaxy, famous for its markets and diverse population. Eamon had spent years exploring the far reaches of space, and this station, with its mix of alien species and human merchants, was a familiar stop. He'd been to countless such places, each one full of hidden dangers and opportunities. That day, Eamon had a rare moment of peace. There was no immediate threat, no urgent military mission, just a simple day on a station that catered to travelers. The station was massive, its hallways filled with traders shouting about their wares, travelers hurrying to catch their ships, and strange smells wafting from various eateries. But even in the midst of this chaos, there was something unusual about the woman who approached him. She was tall, with long dark hair that caught the light in a way that made her seem almost ethereal. Her eyes were sharp, glimmering with intelligence and a touch of mystery, and she walked with a confidence that could only come from someone who knew exactly what they wanted. There was no hesitance in her step, no uncertainty in her gaze. She was human, like him, yet everything about her made her seem different. "Captain Drake," she said, her voice smooth but firm. "I was hoping you might join me for lunch. I have something to offer you that I think you'll find intriguing." Eamon raised an eyebrow, intrigued by the woman's directness. He had met many people over his years in space. Most wanted something from him. Some were looking for an alliance, while others were after something far more dangerous. He'd learned to be cautious, but there was something about her that made him curious. Maybe it was her confidence. Maybe it was the way her eyes seemed to see right through him. "Do I know you?"
he asked, his voice steady.
His hand instinctively moved toward the sidearm strapped to his hip, just in case this was some kind of trap. The woman smiled, sensing his wariness but not showing any fear. "Not yet," she said, "but I'm sure you'll find our conversation worth your time." Eamon hesitated for a moment, his mind running through possible scenarios. He could easily decline and walk away, but something told him that he wouldn't be able to shake the feeling of curiosity if he did. Besides, he had little else to do. After all, what harm could there be in having a meal with a stranger on a space station? "I'll take you up on that offer," he said, his voice low but firm. They walked together toward the station's upper levels, where the finest restaurant on Xandar 5 was located. The building was a high-rise, offering a stunning view of the surrounding star systems. As they entered, the soft hum of music mixed with the low chatter of other diners. The air smelled faintly of spices and something sweet, the perfect environment for a quiet meal. The woman led him to a private table by the window, where the view of the galaxy spread out before them. She sat down gracefully, and Eamon followed her lead. A waiter approached, taking their drink orders before disappearing into the kitchen. "You've traveled a long way, Captain," the woman said as she leaned forward slightly. "I assume you're used to the chaos of trade stations like this." Eamon nodded, his gaze still cautious. "I've seen my fair share of them. They all tend to blur together after a while." She smiled, her expression softening slightly. "I can understand that, but not everything is as it seems. Sometimes the most interesting things happen when you least expect them." Eamon raised an eyebrow but said nothing. The woman continued, as if she hadn't noticed his wariness. "I didn't just bring you here for small talk, Captain," she said. "I wanted to offer you something, a gift of sorts. I know your fleet is strong, but even the mightiest ships can fall if the right pressure is applied." Eamon's curiosity piqued. "What exactly are you offering?" Before she answered, the waiter returned with their drinks and placed a plate of food in front of Eamon. The smell was enticing, though there was something unusual about it. a mixture of spices and an unfamiliar sweetness. His eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't question it. She was watching him closely, waiting for his reaction. "Try it," she said, her voice almost playful. Eamon picked up his fork and cut into the meal. It looked simple enough, a mix of vegetables, a type of meat he didn't recognize, and a sauce that shimmered under the light. He brought it to his mouth and took a bite. The flavors were rich, unlike anything he had tasted before. It was good, very good. But something in the back of his mind whispered that it was too good. The woman's gaze never wavered. "You don't have to be afraid, Captain," she said softly. "It's perfectly safe." He paused, setting his fork down. "Safe?" he repeated, his suspicion growing. "What exactly did you put in this?" Her smile remained, but there was a trace of something more dangerous in her eyes now. "Just a little enhancement. Something to make our conversation more interesting." Eamon's heart rate began to increase as a wave of dizziness washed over him. He shook his head, trying to clear his thoughts, but the room seemed to spin. He looked at the woman, his hand moving subtly to his sidearm again. His vision blurred, but he kept his focus on her, trying to stay calm. "You?" he began, but the words didn't come out right. His throat felt thick, and his limbs were growing heavy. "What have you done? Don't worry, Captain," she said smoothly, standing up and stepping closer to him. "I promise, you'll still be able to think. You just won't be able to stop yourself from telling me everything I need to know." The room seemed to tilt, and Eamon's vision darkened at the edges. He felt a strange numbness spreading through his body, but his mind was still working, still alert. He tried to rise, but his muscles felt as though they were made of lead. He fought against it, refusing to fall under her influence. "You won't get away with this," he managed to say, his voice thick with effort. "I will find a way to stop you," the woman laughed softly. "Oh, Captain, you're in no position to threaten me now."
As the effects of the neurotoxin spread, Eamon felt his body betraying him, his strength fading away.
But one thing remained clear in his mind. This woman, this encounter, was only the beginning of something much bigger, and he wouldn't be the first to underestimate humanity's resilience. Eamon Drake struggled to stay conscious as the world around him began to spin. His body felt as though it were sinking into the chair, heavy and uncooperative. The last thing he remembered was the strange meal that the woman had prepared for him, a meal that now felt like a distant memory. His head was foggy, and his limbs felt like they were no longer his own. He had faced countless dangers in his career, fought off enemies from all across the galaxy, but nothing had ever felt like this. The weight in his chest grew, as if his very breath was being stolen from him. He tried to move his arms, but they felt stiff and unresponsive. Panic rose within him, but he fought it down, focusing on one thing: staying in control. If he could just hold on, if he could just keep his mind sharp, he could still figure out a way to escape. The woman was still standing in front of him, watching him with a calm, almost bored expression, as though nothing were happening at all. Her presence seemed to dominate the space around them, her confidence almost palpable. She took a slow step closer, her voice smooth and controlled. "You're beginning to feel it now, aren't you?" she asked, her eyes never leaving his. Eamon gritted his teeth trying to speak, but his throat was dry, and his tongue felt thick. The room was closing in on him, the walls seeming to shrink with every passing second. He could feel his mind beginning to unravel, his thoughts slipping like sand through his fingers. He had to keep it together. He had to fight this. "I won't fall for this," he managed to whisper, though the words barely escaped his lips. She chuckled softly, shaking her head as if she were humoring a child. "Oh, Captain, you have no idea what you're up against. Your resistance is impressive, I'll give you that. But you're only human, and in the end, even the strongest minds have their limits." Eamon tried to focus on her words, tried to hold on to the clarity that was slowly slipping away from him. His heart raced, pumping blood through his body that felt like it was being weighed down by an invisible force. He could feel his vision dimming, the edges of the room turning blurry and distorted.
Neurotoxins, she continued, specifically designed to affect humans. They work slowly at first, giving you just enough time to realize what's happening.
But in the end, they'll shut you down. Every part of you will stop working until you're left in a haze of confusion. It's a simple, elegant method of control. Despite the fog in his mind, Eamon refused to give in. He clenched his fists, trying to fight through the paralysis that was creeping over him. He could feel his pulse, steady and unyielding, like a reminder that he was still alive. But how long could he hold on? The woman didn't seem to notice the struggle, or maybe she didn't care. She reached for the plate of food in front of him, running her fingers along the edge of the dish as though it were a piece of art.
"You were so eager to eat it, so willing to trust me,"
she said, her voice laced with amusement.
"You didn't even think to question it, did you?"
Eamon's mind was still sharp enough to catch the meaning behind her words. She was toying with him, enjoying his suffering. But he wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. He had been in worse situations before. Much worse. He could survive this. He had to. With every passing second, the poison in his system took hold further. His body felt like it was no longer his, as though he were trapped inside a shell, unable to move or react. But his mind, the one thing she couldn't control, was still his. He focused on that, drawing from every ounce of willpower he had left. The woman leaned in closer, her breath soft against his ear. "It's a pity," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "You're such an interesting specimen, Captain. Humans, so unpredictable, so full of surprises. I'd almost say I admire you, but that would ruin the fun." Eamon's head was swimming, and he could feel his body slowly losing its fight to the poison. He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to center himself, trying to remember the one thing that had always kept him grounded: his crew. The Starhawk was more than just a ship to him. It was his family, and they were depending on him. He couldn't let them down. With everything in him, he focused on one thought: getting out of this. He couldn't allow himself to be defeated by a meal, no matter how well crafted the poison was. If he could just hold on a little longer, he might find a way to break free. He blinked rapidly, trying to clear the blurriness from his vision, and when he opened his eyes again, he was surprised to see that the woman had stepped back, her gaze still fixed on him. She wasn't moving closer anymore. It was as if she were waiting for something. "I'm not finished," Eamon managed to rasp, the words barely forming. The woman raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued by his resistance.
"I'm impressed, Captain."
"You're still fighting." Most would have already succumbed by now. "I'm human," he said, his voice gaining a little more strength. "You underestimate us." For the first time, a flicker of something resembling respect crossed her face, but it was gone almost as quickly as it appeared. She took a step back and folded her arms, watching him with a new interest. "Humanity is a fascinating species," she admitted, her tone softening just a little. "But you're still bound by your limitations. Even now your body is working against you. Your mind is fighting, yes, but you're losing ground." Eamon's heart hammered in his chest, but he refused to give in. He couldn't. The poison was taking hold faster now, spreading through his veins like ice, but he could still feel his fingers twitch, could still sense the strength in his muscles. Even if it was fading, he was still alive. That was all that mattered. He knew he couldn't keep up this fight forever. The poison was designed to work slowly but surely, to wear down his body and mind until there was nothing left to resist. But there had to be something he could do. There had to be a way out. For a moment, his thoughts went to his crew, to the people who trusted him. They were out there, waiting for him to return, and he wouldn't let them down. He couldn't. The woman took a slow step toward him, sensing that her victory was nearly complete. "It's over, Captain," she said softly, almost with a touch of pity in her voice. "You're already too far gone."
But Eamon didn't listen to her. He wasn't done yet.
There had to be a way out of this, some hidden part of him that could still fight back. His body may have been betraying him, but his mind, his will, were still his, and as long as he had that, he wasn't going to give up. His eyes narrowed, his focus sharpening as much as he could manage. There had to be a flaw in her plan. There had to be something, some weakness in the toxin, or in the way it was affecting him. He knew that humanity, despite all its flaws, had one thing that no other species had, the ability to adapt. And it was that very trait, the trait that had allowed humans to rise from the ashes of their past, to conquer space and create their own destiny. That was his greatest weapon, and he wasn't going to lose it now. Eamon Drake's thoughts were jumbled, his body still struggling against the poison that had spread through him like wildfire. His vision wavered, the edges of the room blurring and sharpening in an endless cycle. He felt weak, his muscles heavy, his breath shallow. But despite the overwhelming effects of the neurotoxin, one thing remained clear in his mind. He wasn't done yet. He couldn't give up. Not now. The woman in front of him, the one who had poisoned him with a meal that now felt like an insidious trap, was watching him, her gaze steady, as if she were studying an interesting specimen.
It was clear to Eamon that she believed her victory was all but certain.
But there was something in her eyes now, something he hadn't seen before, a hint of curiosity, a flicker of doubt. He couldn't afford to waste time thinking about what she was feeling. He had to focus on himself, on staying alive, on finding a way out. The woman stood there, her arms folded across her chest. The faintest hint of a smile tugged at her lips, as if she were proud of the effect the neurotoxin had on him. She seemed so calm, so in control, but Eamon knew that beneath her composed exterior, she had to be watching him closely, measuring every breath he took, waiting for the moment when he would fall completely under the poison's sway. But that moment never came. Instead, Eamon began to feel a shift. His mind, despite the sluggishness of his body, started to clear. The fog that had clouded his thoughts began to dissipate, and he realized something important. He wasn't going to succumb to this. Humans were resilient. The very thing that made them vulnerable also made them adaptable. Eamon had known that from the moment he had joined the United Galactic Fleet. Humans didn't back down. They adapted. They learned. They fought. He could feel his muscles responding. Just slightly at first, but enough to give him hope. He focused on his breathing, trying to steady himself, to regain some control over his body. Every small movement mattered now. His hands, though stiff, began to twitch. His heart rate steadied, and the fog in his mind thinned even further. He could think again, clearly, without the constant pressure of the poison dulling his thoughts. The woman seemed to notice the change in him. Her smile faded, and she stepped back slightly, her posture stiffening as if she were preparing for something. Eamon could see the shift in her as well. Perhaps she had underestimated him, or perhaps she had simply never considered that a human could fight back against the toxin she had designed. "Well," she said softly, "you're more resilient than I thought." Her voice was laced with both admiration and frustration. "I didn't expect you to last this long." Eamon struggled to speak, his throat still thick and dry, but his voice was stronger than before. "I'm not finished yet," he said, his words coming out more clearly, despite the effort it took to push them past the poison's effects. The woman raised an eyebrow, and Eamon saw a flicker of something in her eyes, a brief moment of hesitation, followed by a small sigh. "Perhaps I underestimated you, Captain," she said, her tone less certain now. "But you're still trapped. Your body may be fighting, but it's losing. You can't win." Eamon refused to believe that. He could feel his strength returning, his grip on reality tightening with every passing second. His mind was sharper now, his thoughts clearer. He wasn't going to let her win, no matter how cleverly she had planned this. The woman stepped closer again, her movements slow, almost as if she were trying to gauge his next move. She had seen the resistance in him, and it made her wary, but Eamon wasn't interested in giving her another chance to attack. He had to act fast, before the poison took hold again, before the numbness overtook him once more. "Tell me," Eamon said, his voice steady despite the strain he still felt. "What is it that you really want? Why go through all this trouble just to poison me?" Her eyes narrowed, and Eamon saw the shift in her expression. She wasn't the only one who had been toying with the situation. He had his own questions now, and for the first time he could sense that she wasn't quite sure how to answer. "I'm not the one you should be asking," she said, her voice tight. "There are forces far beyond my control at play here. You're in the middle of something much larger than you realize." Eamon's mind raced as he processed her words. There was more to this than he had originally thought. This wasn't just about him or the Starhawk. Whatever she was involved in, it involved people, or perhaps organizations, that had far more power than she let on. "You've been sent to take me down," Eamon said slowly, piecing the puzzle together. "But who sent you? Who's really pulling the strings?" For the first time, the woman hesitated, her eyes flickering away for just a moment. It was a tiny break in her composure, but Eamon caught it. She wasn't just a hired gun. There was something deeper going on, something she wasn't ready to reveal. "I can't tell you that," she said finally, her voice almost reluctant. "I can't. You wouldn't understand."
It's not just about you or your ship, Captain. There's a bigger picture, and you're just a part of it.
Eamon stared at her, trying to make sense of what she was saying. The words didn't quite add up, but he had a feeling that this wasn't just a simple assassination attempt.
There was something much more complicated at play. Something that made her act this way. Something that had led her to poison him and put them both in this dangerous game. "You're not my enemy, are you?" Eamon asked, the words slipping out before he could stop them. The woman didn't answer right away. She just stood there, studying him, her eyes calculating. The silence between them stretched out for a long moment, both of them assessing the other, trying to figure out what to do next. Then, finally, she spoke, her voice quieter now. "You're right. I'm not your enemy, Captain. But that doesn't mean I'm on your side either. I'm here because I have no choice." Eamon frowned, still trying to process her words. He was confused. No, more than confused. He was beginning to understand that this wasn't a simple mission. This was something much bigger, something that involved a level of complexity that he couldn't quite grasp yet. "So, you're a pawn in some larger game?" Eamon asked, his voice softer now. "You've been used?" She looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Something like that," she said, almost reluctantly. "I'm not the one you should be angry with, Captain. You're facing something much more dangerous than you think." Eamon wasn't sure what she meant, but he was starting to see a crack in her facade. She wasn't as confident as she had appeared before. Something had shifted. She wasn't just a cold, calculating agent. There was fear in her eyes now. Fear of something far more dangerous than he could imagine. "I don't need to understand everything," Eamon said, his voice low but steady. "But I'm not going to die here." "Not like this." The woman took a step back, her face softening slightly. "I wasn't planning to kill you, Captain," she said, the words carrying an edge of regret. "But you're not supposed to survive this." "You're not supposed to fight back." Eamon's heart pounded in his chest, but he was more focused now than he had been in the past few minutes. His body was still weak, his limbs sluggish, but he could feel the fight coming back. He wasn't done yet. "You might have poisoned me," he said, locking eyes with her. "But you've made one mistake." "You've underestimated humanity. You've underestimated me." The woman's expression faltered for a brief moment, the smallest crack in her composure. Eamon saw it, and he knew that, Despite the poison still coursing through his veins, he had the upper hand now. "You're wrong," he said. "I'm not just some target. I'm a human, and I'm not going down without a fight." The woman stood there, her gaze shifting, her mind clearly racing. It was a look of realization, of understanding that, despite everything, Eamon had managed to survive longer than anyone expected. And that was when he saw it. The briefest hint of respect, mixed with something else, something almost like fear. Eamon wasn't going to let this go. He couldn't. There was too much at stake. And now, with the smallest flicker of hope igniting in his chest, he knew that he had a chance. Eamon Drake's mind was clearer than ever. Despite the poison still circulating through his bloodstream, he could feel his body rebelling, each muscle screaming at him to stop, to give in. But his spirit was stronger. He was a human, and that meant something. He refused to be a pawn in anyone's game. The woman who had poisoned him was still watching him closely, but there was something different now. The uncertainty in her eyes was evident, a small crack in the wall of composure she had carefully built around herself. For the first time since they had met, Eamon didn't feel like he was entirely at her mercy. He had turned the tables, even if just for a moment. "You think you're winning, don't you?" she said, her voice almost gentle, but there was a bitterness to it, like she was forcing herself to admit something she hadn't wanted to face. "You're not. You can't fight this forever, Captain." Eamon didn't respond immediately. He wasn't interested in her taunts anymore. Instead, he focused on his breathing, taking slow, steady breaths to calm his racing heart. Every muscle in his body felt like it was slowly shutting down, but his mind was alive, sharper than it had ever been. He could still think clearly, and that was all that mattered. "You're wrong," he said, his voice still hoarse, but more confident now. "I'm not done yet, and I'm not going to let you win." The woman's eyes narrowed, but there was no more amusement in them. She was starting to see that Eamon wasn't like the others she had faced. He wasn't just some soldier to be poisoned and left to die. He was something more.
And that realization made her uneasy.
"You don't get it, do you?" she said, her tone quieter now, almost like she was explaining something to a child.
"There's no winning in this. There are bigger forces at play here than you can imagine." Eamon looked up at her, his vision still a little blurry, but his determination as clear as ever. "I don't care about your bigger forces," he said firmly. "I care about one thing. Getting out of here. And I will, no matter what."
For the first time, the woman hesitated.
It was only for a second, but Eamon caught it. He could see it now, the flicker of doubt in her eyes. She wasn't as confident as she had been at the start. The longer she spent with him, the more she seemed to realize that this wasn't going to go the way she had planned.
"You're wasting your time,"
she said, shaking her head slowly, though there was no real conviction behind the words. "You're fighting against something you can't defeat. You're human. You're too weak. You'll never survive." Eamon let out a short, breathless laugh, even though it hurt to do so. "You've got it wrong," he said. "Humanity has always been about overcoming the impossible." I've seen it time and time again. People fighting against all odds, surviving when they should have been dead. Humans don't give up, no matter how hard it gets. The woman's gaze faltered slightly, and Eamon noticed her hands tighten into fists at her sides. She was trying to remain composed, but he could see the cracks starting to form. Her belief in the superiority of her plan, in her control over the situation, was starting to slip, and that was the moment when Eamon knew he had a chance. He wasn't going to let this moment slip by. He wasn't going to let her win. He focused everything he had left on one simple goal: breaking free. "Let me tell you something," Eamon said, his voice stronger now. I faced worse than this.
You think this poison is going to stop me? You think it's going to slow me down?
The rhythm was of stars of the fan. The shrem-based mind. Her expression shifted, a mix of frustration and disbelief crossing her features. She had underestimated him, and now she was starting to see that he wasn't like the others. He wasn't just another obstacle to be taken out. He was a human, and humans didn't just fall when things got tough. They adapted. They found a way. The woman took a step back, as if she were suddenly unsure of how to handle him. Eamon noticed the shift in her. She was losing her confidence, the calm facade slipping away as she realized she might have made a mistake. She had underestimated humanity, and now it was costing her. "Don't think this is over," she said, her voice colder now, though there was a hint of hesitation beneath the sharp tone. "You're still weak. Your body is breaking down."
You're just stalling.
His body was still fighting against the poison, but he could feel the toll it was taking on him. His vision was blurry, his movements slow, and his limbs felt heavy. But even as the poison continued to work its way through him, he could feel something else, the fire inside him that refused to be extinguished. "I'm not stalling," Eamon said, his voice steady despite the pain that still coursed through his veins.
I'm surviving, and that's what humans do best.
The woman didn't respond at first. She just stood there, her eyes locked onto his, as if she were trying to decide whether or not to kill him right then and there. But Eamon could see it now, the uncertainty in her eyes. She was questioning herself. She wasn't sure anymore, and that was his chance. You don't have to do this," Eamon said, his voice softer now, but still carrying the weight of his words. You're not just some tool. You're not just a puppet for someone else's plan. You have a choice.
You can stop this. You don't have to keep going down this path.
For a moment, the woman didn't say anything. She just stood there, her face unreadable. Eamon could see her struggle, her mind torn between the path she had been following and the one that Eamon was offering her. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet, almost defeated.
I never wanted this. I never wanted to be part of something like this.
Eamon was taken aback by her words. There was a depth to her voice now, a sadness that hadn't been there before. He could see that she was more than just a cold, calculating assassin. She was a person, caught in something much bigger than herself. And it was clear now that she was realizing the truth of it.
You don't have to do this, Eamon repeated, his voice firm but compassionate.
You don't have to be a part of this anymore. You can make a choice. For a long time, the woman just stood there, silent. Her eyes flickered back and forth as if she were weighing the words in her mind, considering what Eamon was saying. And then, slowly, she nodded. It was a small, almost imperceptible movement. But it was enough. You're right, she said softly. I don't have to do this. Eamon's heart raced. This was it. The moment when everything could change. He had fought through the poison, fought through the darkness in his mind, and now, for the first time, it seemed like he had a chance to escape, a chance to live, and a chance to change the course of everything. Together, Eamon said, his voice strong, we can stop this. Together, we can make sure that humanity wins, not just me, not just you, but everyone. The woman's gaze softened, and for the first time Eamon saw a hint of something he hadn't expected. Hope.
I'll help you, she said, her voice quiet but resolute.
I will. With that, the battle was no longer just about survival. It was about something more, a choice, and humanity's greatest weapon was never the strength of their armies or their weapons. It was the strength of their will, the unyielding spirit that refused to give up, no matter the odds.